Second. This week sometime, I don't know. Okay, so yesterday we learned, let's see if I can remember what we learned. Yesterday, the last Mishnah we learned was if you had an egla, the mace was precisely between two cities, according to Eliezer, the two closest cities actually each bring an egla rufa. So there's two egla rufas that are brought. The second halacha we learned in the Mishnah was when it comes to a mace mitzvah koines mekaymai, where would you bury the mace? Would you bury it where the head was found or where the goof was found? And the machlokes is totally in what happens upon death. Does the body fall where it is and the head might roll away, or does the head fall where it is and the body might continue to walk with its nerves? Then we discussed what's the point on the body that you measure from. We had a three-way machlokes if it's from the belly button, from the nose, or from the wound, from the neck. Shmuel, you have an article? You both have an article. I touch tibure as belly button. Is that what it means, or is the article say from the belly? Is it the belly button? Was that the belly button? Okay, the So now we're up to the Mishnah all the way at the bottom. A navel means a trumpet. The Hebrew word navel, yeah. Okay. Nifteru zikne Yerushalayim v'hochuleh. So the process of determining which city is going to deal with the Egla Rufa, in other words, the people, the team that measures which city that has a Bezdin is the closest to this corpse, that's done by the Bezdin either of 3, according to Reb Shimon, of 5, according to Reb Yehuda, or of 71, according to Reb Elazar ben Yaakov. According to Reb Elazar ben Yaakov, the Kohen Gadol and the Melech were also there. But once that team fulfills its objective, then they hand over the remainder of the investigation to the Zikne Oisar, the city that was determined to be the closest. Mavin Eglas Bakr. They have to bring a calf that was never pulled with a yoke. Even though this animal had a mum, it's still allowed to be used for an egla rufa. They take it to a nachal that's Eson kamashmoy. Eson means hard. Now there's actually a machlokes rishonim what Eson means. The Mishnah makes it sound simple. Eson kamashmoy, the simple pshat of Eson. But even the simple pshat of Eson is discussed. Rashi tells us that what Eson means. Rashi tells us that what Eson means is. Rashi tells us later in the Gemara, means a place that's very hard earth. Eishon kamashmoy kasha, hard. Oh, I'm sorry, Rashi doesn't say it. The Mishnah says it. But the Rambam learns hard means there's a river running vigorously through at the time. So it's a stormy, raging river. That's what Eishon means according to the Rambam. But Rashi learns it's just hard, dry riverbed land. Even if it's not Eson kosher. In other words, the mitzvah to do it in such a place is lechatchila, but the eved, it would be good. The process would work without it. They would chop off the head of this calf with an axe from behind. Now, once this is done, the place where this is done, and there's a shiloh, what does it mean, the place? Is it right below it? Is it arba amas around it? There's actually a shiloh in the Rishonim how much of an area is affected, but it will be asur milas raya. You're no longer ever allowed to plant there. Umilava than doing any type of work there. The Gemara is going to tell us that this means work that involves the land, but other type of work such as umuter lisrek shampishtan, you could use that area to comb flax to get the psoilus out of it, or l'nakasham avonim, or to chisel stones. That would be allowed to be done in that area, just not work related to the land. Then zikne oisoir roichtines yadeim b'mayim. They washed their hands. B'makaim arifa shalagala. At that point, v'ayimrim, and they say yadeinu lo shavkas adam hazeh. We did not spill this blood. ve'einenu, and our eyes loyro. Correct the Mishnah. V'chi al daitenu. Also, would anybody in their right minds even contemplate that they have to give a disclaimer? It wasn't us. Who would think that the heads of the bezdin would be sheif chedamim? Rather, what they meant was, we're not even responsible for this death in an indirect fashion. We didn't notice him in the city, and we didn't offer him something to eat. When we see someone who's a guest in the city who normally is not here, we would have for sure offered him to help him with whatever he would need, such as food. And Rashi tells us that if he was starving and he couldn't find anyone to give him food, it's possible that he tried to rob somebody on the road, and that person, of course, defended himself and killed him. Or if we saw him, we would for sure not have let him go without accompanying him, without giving him some respect. So that's what they said. Not only did we not kill him, of course we didn't kill him, but we also did not abandon him. We also didn't leave him unattended in the event that we saw someone there. Then the Kaihanim say, now I'm not sure who are the Kaihanim. Oh, because the so in the pasuk it does mention that Kaihanim came as well. Now we know what they were here for, because they announced Kaper la'amcha Yisrael asher podisa Hashem v'al titein dam noki b'kerev hamecha. Okay, b'kerev amcha Yisrael. Now the last words of the pasuk is v'nechaper lahamadam, and the dam should be mechaper for them. Zok the Mishnah, that's not part of the text that they said. That was just part of the narrative that the Torah is telling us. Because that's not part of the text that they read. Ella ruach hakodesh mevasras, and the Torah is telling us, if you go through this process, then if you do this process, hadam is kaper lahem, the dam will be a kapara for them. It's brought down that it's also sagula to find a murderer. If they do this process, then they'll have siyata d'shmaya to be able to find the murderer. The Maratz Chiyuv says a very interesting contrast between how Jews roll and how Goyim roll. Whenever there's a murder in the city, what happens? Right away, the mayor of the city gets up and the chief of police gets up, and they all say that we're not going to tolerate this type of violence, and we're going to find the perpetrator, those cowards who killed somebody, and we're going to find the perpetrator, and we're going to find who's responsible. I'm a tzaddik. I'm a big tzaddik. I'm holy. But we're going to find the bad guy. But Klal Yisrael is exactly the opposite. The leaders of the generation get up and they say, we take responsibility. We maybe didn't take care of somebody who needed help. We maybe didn't give the proper respect to a guest. We're taking responsibility. We need to absolve. We need to do tshuva for our aveiros. Then maybe we'll find the actual murderer. But we're responsible. I've never heard Trudeau get up and apologize for himself. He's always busy apologizing for everybody else. That's right, but he never apologized for the things that he did wrong, even though he did more things wrong in his 8 years than all of the cumulative wrongs that everyone did in the history of Canada. What? Uh-huh. For everybody else, but not for his own affairs. And he did more affairs than anybody else. Yeah. I'm not. That's right. That's right. It's funny how the Mishnayos are so political. The Maretz Chiyus. Yeah. Yes, I just find it amazing how political the Mishnayos are and how they relate to the political background of our days. The Mishnah tells us that even though the Eglah Roof has a mum, it's not a problem. Why not? Mum poisel ba'agala or ba'egla mi kal v'chomer. We can have a kal v'chomer to show that in fact a mum would pass, and this is the kal v'chomer. Uma para matacha para aduma she'eina shonim poisel hispa. A para aduma, no matter how old it is, as long as it doesn't have any white hair, but no matter how old it is, it's still going to be kosher for a para aduma. Nevertheless, mum poiselba. If a para aduma has a mum, it's disqualified. Egla she'shonim poisel hispa. An Egla Rupa has to be a maximum of a year old. Once it's a year old, it can no longer be used. So it's more chomer than paraduma. It's more restrictive than paraduma. Einodin, surely shehemum poisel ba. Surely a mum in an egla arufa should be possible. And this is, of course, going to be a very, as you can see from the beginning of the Gemara, this is going to be a very technical Gemara. Zog the Gemara, shiny hasam, there's a special reason why we cannot learn from a kal v'chaimer, from paraduma, that by egla rufa mum pasels. Because there's a special word mentioned by paraduma, we'll call this word a kal v'chaimer buster. What is the kal v'chaimer buster that it says by paraduma? The amarkra asher ein ba mum. By a paraduma, the paraduma ba, it doesn't have a mum. Ba mum paisel, only in the paraduma will a mum pasel, the ein mum paisel be'egla. Don't use a kal v'chaimer to extend the psul of a mum to an egla rufa. So the word ba is a kal v'chaimer buster. Correct the Gemara, if ba is a kal v'chaimer buster, then it says ba in other places than paraduma. Nowhere else it says ba. It says ba by egla arufa as well. Correct the Gemara, elamayata lo yehu sharavoidos poislois ba. Do you know what it says by paraduma? What type of things disqualify a paraduma? This is what it says. Zois HaTorah asher tziva Hashem leimar daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yikru alecha paraduma tamima asher b'mum, that we know. Asher loy Allah aleha oil. The only thing that's not allowed to happen to a paraduma is a yoke may not be placed upon it. That's what it says as far as the restriction of a paraduma. So what if I didn't put a yoke on it? What if I put a sack of potatoes on it? What if I put something else on it? Would that pass a paraduma? Or maybe only if I put a yoke on it. So we actually learn from egla rufa to paraduma to extend that psul not only to actually putting on a yoke. Let's have a look at the pasuk that discusses the restrictions on the egla rufa. It says v'haya ira kroiva lacholo v'lochu zikna ira he eglas bakar actually ubad ba. It didn't do any work at all. That's much more restrictive than just not putting on the oil. But then it says actually moshcha oil. It doesn't say you can't have an oil upon it. You couldn't have pulled it with an oil, which is mashma that paraduma, if you just placed an oil on it, it would passel. But a egla rufa is only possible if you actually pull the animal with the oil. But ashaloi ubadva means you didn't do any type of work with it, like putting a sack of potatoes on it. That would disqualify egla rufa. But there's no indication that that would disqualify a paraduma, because a paraduma just says ashaloi oil, but a sack of potatoes wouldn't passel. So if that's the case, since we're going to show you that it says ba by egla rufa, actually we just looked at that pasuk, so we should look at it again. It says actually ubad ba, right? The same kal v'chaimer buster that we found by paraduma, you find that same kal v'chaimer buster by egla rufa. Now, how would we? So based on the actual text of the pasuk, the only thing that would disqualify a paraduma is if an oil was placed upon it. So based on ba being a kal v'chaimer buster, we should not export the other type of avodah that you could do with an animal to paraduma. In other words, by paraduma, only an oil will passel it, but not ubad ba, not any other type of avodas. If ba is a kal v'chaimer buster. So where do we see not like that? In fact, we're going to demonstrate that by paraduma, it will become disqualified even if it has a regular load placed upon it that's not an oil. So if you put on it a bundle of folded up sacks, tula, that would passel the paraduma. Placing a bundle of sacks on a paraduma would passel. Why in the world would it be? It's not an oil. It must be that we're importing that information from egla rufa. But you just told me ba is a kal v'chaimer buster. So how could you import that information with a mematzinu or a kal v'chaimer from egla rufa? It says ba, and you told me earlier that ba says we don't learn anything with a kal v'chaimer. That's the kasha that the Gemara is going to ask. But there's another halacha. By an egla rufa, you had to actually pull the animal. It wasn't just enough to place an oil on it or to place a load on it, you have to pull it. If you, like we read, it doesn't say asher lo ola oil. It says asher lo moshcha oil. So there's interesting nuances. By paraduma, merely placing not only an oil on it, but even a regular load, which you import that information from Egla Rufa. However, by Egla Rufa, any load would possible, but only if you actually made the animal move when it was loaded up. So the Gemara wants to know, how could we learn from Egla Rufa to Paraduma that even a non-oil type of load will possible? It says ba by Egla Rufa. And with the Gemara, you know why? Because ba might be a mematzinu buster. Ba might be a kalvachomer buster. But ba could not stand up to a gzera shava. Yalfinan oil me Egla. The reason why we could learn from Paraduma to Paraduma, from Egla Rufa, that other types of loads will also disqualify it, is because you have a gzera shava. A gzera shava is untouchable. So ba will not be able to say not to make the gzera shava. Right, Gemara, if there's a gzera shava, there's reciprocity. The same way you could learn to Paraduma from Egla Rufa, that even other types of loads will learn the other way as well. Egla nami tesi oilam lipara, and therefore, let's say a mum should pass by an Egla Rufa, because we said oil, a gzera shava, is not impacted, is not neutralized by ba. So once you have that link between Paraduma and Egla Rufa that cannot be refuted, and that channel that you're using to learn that by Paraduma, even a non-oil load will passel, well then use that channel for 2 ways. And just like by Paraduma a mum passels, so too by an Egla Rufa a mum should passel. Gemara, Hamid Rachmana ba, but it says ba. Correct Gemara by Egla namik siv ba. So if it says ba, it busts it up. Gemara, no. Really, we can learn it with a mematzinu. And ba by Paraduma is a kalvachomer buster, and it tells us don't apply the restriction of mum from Paraduma to Egla Rufa. So by the same token, why don't you use ba to stop applying the principle of any other load to Paraduma? No, because the ba by Egla Rufa is not teaching us only by Egla Rufa and not by Paraduma. It's teaching us only by Egla Rufa, but not by Kachim. If you have an animal that you did work with, and now you want to give it for a carbon, you're allowed to give it for a carbon, even though it once did work. So you could have an animal that you did work with, and now you decide you want it for a carbon, you're allowed to have it for a carbon. This Gemara, I don't think they learned this Gemara in Lakewood. But the Litvish, I don't think they learned this Gemara. Because the Gemara is saying that even though someone could work, he still has the kedusha of a carbon. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they learned this Gemara in Lakewood. I'm not sure. I don't know. Did I just say that, or was I just thinking that? Strike that from the record. Okay, I'm not recording. Okay, good. Zok to Gemara. If any of my Eidim has ever watched this, I'm just a joke. And if any shatchen or person who's looking into my family for a shidduch ever looks at this, I'm telling you, I'm just joking. Don't worry, calm down. Zok to Gemara. Sol kedaita chamina. You might have thought leise b'kalvachomer me egla. You should have a kalvachomer from egla that if you did work with an animal, it's no longer ready to be brought as a carbon. What would be the kalvachomer? Uma egla madachan egla rufa. She'ain mum poiselba. Even if it has a mum, it's still going to be kosher for an egla rufa. Nevertheless, avoid a poiselas ba. If you did any work with this animal, it can no longer be used as an egla rufa. Kachim. Shamum poiselas ben. Kachim, which is much more restrictive what type of animal can be used. Because if it has a mum, you wouldn't be able to use it as a carbon. Einoidin. Sha'avoid a poiselas behen. Surely, avoida should passel such a carbon. That's why I have ba to tell me no. Ba, avoida only passes by an egla rufa, but avoida doesn't pass by a carbon. Correct, Gemara, I don't need ba for that, because your kalvachomer is not a good kalvachomer. Why? Because ikal mivrich, you know why an egla rufa avoida passes? Mal egla shekain shanim poislos ba. An egla rufa is limited in the years of an egla rufa, like we said, it's only up to a year old. Correct, the Gemara. Okay, so you have a pirch on the kalvachomer to karbonos that have no age restriction. But you know there are some karbonos that do have an age restriction. For those karbonos, we have the kalvachomer. Atu kachim, mileka, the paslu, behu shanim. Are there no karbonos that there is a limitation on their age, and Rashi tells us which karbanos have a restriction of age. Rashi is Varei Pesach. I'm on the top, Rashi on the second column. Varei Pesach v'chatos diksivu b'nei shnasa. So on those karbanos, I should have a kal v'chomer. Ma'adich egla rufa, which ma'adich egla rufa, which does not have a problem of mum, has a problem of avodah. The korban Pesach and the korban chatos, which has a problem of mum, surely should have a problem of avodah. And don't ask me that egla rufa has a restriction that Pesach and chatos doesn't have. It's limited in its years, because Pesach and chatos also are limited in its years. So therefore, I need ba to tell me that a korban chatos and a korban Pesach does not have a psul avodah. He itzrich kra lahanach kochim the pasla b'hu shonim. So you just taught me a major halacha that kachim you're allowed to use animals that did work. You're allowed to use animals that did work. What's the makar? Based on what the Gemara is saying now, the word ba that it says by egla rufa. Correct the Gemara. Is that how we know it? We actually have another place where we already know this rule from. It says Lagabi the mumin that passel an animal for a korban, iveris if it's blind or shover or broken, oy choritz oy abelas. These are all different types of conditions. Rashes, gerb oy alefes. I don't know what these mean. Each one means. We'll get to there in kachim. I'm sorry. They're all types of shchin. Okay. Loy sakrivu ela lachem. These are not allowed to be brought as karbonos. And from ela or medayik, ela iatamakriv, avolatemakriv kodashim. So why do you need ba in egla rufa to teach us that a korban could be brought even though it was once worked with? We already have Eila to tell us the same halacha. Dr. Gemara Itrich. So kedaita chamina heicha da abed ben avodas heter. Where will avodah not possible if you did avodas heter? Aval avodas iser eimelitzru. So if you only had one limit of Eila, that would tell me, okay, if you did avodas heter, it will not disqualify an animal from being brought as a korban. But what if you did an avodah with an animal that was usher? What is an example of an avodah that you could do with an animal that's usher? Rashi says, "Kaglayim b'Shabbos." If you did work with an animal on Shabbos, like klayim, b'shor b'chamar. So there's many work that you could do with an animal that would be usher. Maybe that would disqualify the animal from being a korban emelit. Ritzricha, we need two psukim. One to tell you that even avodas heter doesn't passel, and one to tell you that even avodas isur doesn't passel. Shricha. Correct Gemara, I don't need ba to tell you that avodas isur doesn't passel. Avodas isur, I also have another source for. It says umiyad benechor leisakrivu es lechem mikol leila. We say that even a goy's korban may not have a moon, and from that eila we could also be b'nai eila iatamakriv. So now we have two elas. One ela will tell you even a malacha that's mutter, and one ela will tell you even a malacha that was osur. You could still bring that animal for a korban. So once again, why do I need ba by egla rupa to teach us for the third time the same malacha? What type of animal can be used for a korban even though it once did work? That's if it did work when it was still chulin. What happens if you're makish an animal and it already has kedushas agov, it's already a korban, and you use it for malacha? You might have thought that possible the korban. Ba tells you that even if you did avodah with an animal illegally because it was already a korban, it will not disqualify that animal from being a kosher korban. Beautiful. So if we have three sukim, two elas, and one ba to tell us that even if the animal was worked with, it's still kosher for a korban. We need one for malacha asura, one for malacha muteres. One for malacha muteres, one for malacha asura, and one if the malacha was done after the animal became a korban. Gufa. Amar b'dumarav. Hinich aleha oidish l'sakin. We're going back to the paraduma. I don't know if there's me'ilah by kedushas aguf. Only by kedushas dam, right? It goes v'chulin yimayil. I don't think there's me'ilah by kedushas aguf. Amar b'dumarav. Hinich aleha. By me'ilah, I think the halachas of me'ilah only apply by kedushas dam. I don't think it applies by kedushas aguf. You took a package of sacks and you put it on top of the paraduma. Psula, that renders this paraduma psula. But by the egla rufa, it's achet himshach. Merely placing a load on the egla doesn't disqualify it, because the pasuk says shalei moshcha b'oil. It's not enough that it just had a load on it; it had to be moved or pulled with that oil upon it. Meisvei, oil. It says oil. Ein li ela oil. I would only know by a paraduma that an oil apostles it, because it says asher loy oil. Shar avoidus minayin. How do you know any other avoider will also disqualify a paraduma? So it's a kavachomer from egla rufa. Uma egla she'ein mum poisel ba. Madachan egla rufa, which is very open, not discriminating, because even if an animal has a mum, it's still good for an egla rufa. Nevertheless, shar avoidus poisel spa. Any other type of work that you did with it, even though it's not an oil, would passel it. Paraduma shemum poisel ba. It's very discriminating what type of animal can be used for paraduma. Surely not only a yoke, but anything else that you place on it should also disqualify the paraduma. And if you don't like my kavachomer, I could bring you a different raya that any malacha that's done with the paraduma should disqualify it. Nemer kan oil, it says oil, asher lo yoleh oil by paraduma. V'nemer la'alon oil, and it says oil by egla rufa. Mal la'alon char avoid is poislo spa. Just over egla rufa, it says asher lo ubad ba. So we know any other avoider, in addition to just an oil, will disqualify this animal from the egla rufa. Avkan, so too by paraduma, shar avoid is poislo. Why did we need this shav of oil? It sounds like a really good kavachomer, right? Madach and agala, which is not discriminating, ain't pum poiselba. Surely a paraduma, where it's a mum poiselba, should also be disqualified with any malacha. No, that's not such a good kavachomer. You know why? V'chitema ikalumifrich mala egla shekain shanim poislesba. Egla rufa has a chumrah that paraduma doesn't have. You know what it has? It has a restriction in its age. So therefore, that might be the reason why any type of avoid would passel it. But a paraduma, yes, a mum passel, but it doesn't have that chaimer that age passels. So maybe you shouldn't be able to learn from egla rufa that other malachas passel. That's why you need oil, you need xer shava. No, as long as it doesn't apply here, bishat vasahu is no problem. But age is no problem with age. But I think we're talking about a maximum age. We're talking about a maximum age. Inami, or another way to slug up the kavachomer is kachim yechichu. I could slug up the kavachomer from egla rufa to paraduma from kachim. Shemum poisel behem. Kachim also has this disqualification that a mum pasels. The ein avoida paselos behem. So you can't bring me a raya that just because a mum pasels by a paraduma, that avoida should also passel, because a mum passeling has no connection to avoida passeling, because a regular carbon, a mum passels and avoida doesn't. So therefore, we need xer shava. Nemer kan oil by paraduma, nemer la'alan oil by egla rufa, malalon char avoidis. Just by egla rufa, any avoida will disqualify the animal. Avkan char avoidis. Gewaltig. Break the gemara. We makam shabasa. What is the makar? How do we know by paraduma that all other avoid is possible? We know it's from egla rufa. Isn't there a rule by egla rufa that it's not just enough to place a load on the egla rufa? It has to be pulled. So how come by paraduma merely placing it on it will passel if the whole makar of paraduma is egla rufa? And by egla rufa merely placing the load will not passel. It has to be pulled. So how do you know by paraduma that even if you just place the load? Correctly, we makam shabasa. Look at the source. The source is the egla rufa. So, frankly, Gemara, how could you tell me that merely placing a sack of a bundle of sacks on the paraduma passels it shouldn't be enough? If the whole makar is egla rufa, the rule should be if you place sacks on the animal and you pull the animal and you move the animal with the sacks, then it should passel. But without that, how do you know it passels just by merely placing the sacks on? Zok Gemara, you're 100% right. Tanoihi. It's actually a machloikas tanoim. Because it says oil, only a yoke, only a yoch. but a regular package you don't see. So the whole makor is from Egla Rupa. So it's more Tanoi. The Ika de Maisi law Egla. There are those who learn that the makor of Paraduma having any other load on it is from Egla Rupa. But the Ika de Maisi law Migufa de Para. But there are those who, like Chaim just said, learn Mineu Bay in Paraduma that any other load would disqualify, and therefore it would even be merely by placing the load, even if you didn't move the animal with the load. How do you see Muneu Bay by Paraduma that any other load would also disqualify? Titania oil, ainly oil, Shara Voidish Minayin. How do I know that any other type of avoida will disqualify a Paraduma? Tabaloima Asher Loy Ola Oleha oil. It could have said Asher Loy Ola oil Oleha, but it says Loy Ola Oleha oil. So you read it like this: Asher Loy Ola Oleha. Period. Nothing ever came on it. Any avoida, and then oil. So from the order of the words, we see that any type of a load placed on the paraduma would passel it, and merely placing the load, even without moving the animal, would disqualify the paraduma. Become makar. Oil. What do we need? I'm sorry, matam oil. Why did the B'chal say oil? If asher loy ola aleh includes any type of load you place on the animal, why B'chal does it even mention the word oil? The Gemara to tell us the following: oil poisel bein b'shas avoda bein shaloi b'shas avoda. An oil would passel the animal whether or not it's working with it or not. But shar avodos ain't poislin ella b'shas avoda. What does shas avoda mean? Because we already said you don't have to move the animal, right? You're just placing it on it. So what do you mean shas avoda? Dr. Gemara shaloi b'shas avoda means ba'afilu hanicha eleh lahakel matzam yodav elelimshay. If you place, let's say you're carrying an oil, you got to move it from place to place. It's very heavy. So for a minute, you wanted to rest it on the animal. That would passel it immediately. But what if I had a package of sacks, and I was tired, and I needed to put it down for a minute? Not that I needed to use the animal to transport it, just wanted to put it down for a minute. That would not passel the paraduma. So el b'shas avoda, kloimer shavoda zula tzarchi, avla kroi ba'alma, shaniach sakala, v'loy lalicha, ela ikri v'oisev loy pasla. So an oil, no matter what, if you put an oil on a paraduma, bam, no matter how you put it, why you put it, when you put it, it's going to disqualify the animal. But if you put a sack of potatoes on the animal, that's only if you were planning to transport it. Even if it didn't move yet, you just placed it on it, it would disqualify the paraduma. But if you only put it to rest, but you had no intention of moving the animal, then it would not passel the paraduma. I don't remember. Maybe you had to come to move it. I would have to see the Gemara. I don't know. Ve'ema asher loy aleha klal. Ve'ema asher loy aleha klal. Let's say asher loy aleha is very general. It's a klal. Oil is a very specific item. Prat. Maybe klalu prat ein b'klal elamasha b'prat. Therefore, oil in only a yoke would disqualify a paraduma mida achwina loy. The Gemara says asher loy olel. The word asher is a ribui. B'tanyinami gabi egla. You find by egla, we would have also had this problem of klalu prat, and the word asher by egla rufa also opens it up to every type of load, because it says by egla rufa oil. Asher loy mashcha oil. Ainly ala oil. Shara avadis b'nayin. Hamad loymer asher loy ubadba mikol makan. Correct. Gemara imkein mat hamad loymer oil. So why does the pasuk mention oil at all by egla rufa if it's any type of load? It is oil poisel bein b'shas avoda bein shaloi b'shas avoda, but shar avodas ain't poisel ela b'shas avoda. The same comment as before. The ema asher lo ubadba is klal. Ubadba means no type of work at all. Oil is prat, and say klal prat ain't b'chlal ela masha b'prat. Oil in mida achwina loy. And the Gemara by egla rufa it also is a share. Ribuyahu to say that it's not just the oil, don't use the klal prat, open it up to everything. That would be good. It could stop right there. Nothing. Nothing came on it. I hear. Rabavo. What you're doing is that you're analyzing the dakistic limudim of psukim. They're good shilas, but it's very hard for a mere mortal today to be able to understand the medarshim, the vemedarshim. So I think it's important to raise your shilah So what does I shine the line geworden? Ashloi ula lot stop. But the Gemara makes such a deal. I hear. Amar Rabbi, boy minim Rabbi Yochanan, Meshichas oil bekama. By an egla rufa, we said that it's ashalei moshcha. You have to pull it. How far do you have to pull it? How far does the animal have to walk with this oil to disqualify it from being an egla rufa? Amar le kamole oil, the size of an oil. If you ever saw a picture of an oil, it runs across the shoulders of the animal. It could be like 5-6 feet long, but it's only maybe about 4, 5, 6 inches thick. It's just a beam of wood. So what is it? Is it a tefach or is it 2 amas? I got pshat in what Rabbi Yochanan said. Mishicha soiler roch by tefach. Correct the Gemara. Why is Rabbi Yochanan? Why is Rabbi Yochanan say Meshichas oil, or why did he say Kamali oil? Why wasn't Rabbi Yochanan specific to tell us Tevach? Then we don't have to speculate what it's talking about. Hakamash Malon, Shira the oil Tevach Haver, because Rabbi Yochanan wanted to tell us a side piece of information that the normal thickness of a piece of wood that's being used for an oil has to be a Tevach. If you buy an oil from somebody, you order an oil on eBay or on Kijiji, and they send you an oil and it's only an inch thick, it's too flimsy. You can say, I'm sorry, this is a mekach tos. When I ordered an oil, it's understood that a typical oil is going to be at least 4 or 5 inches thick, at least a tefach thick, and therefore you didn't fulfill your obligation. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Shol, Amar Torah hevi egla benachal. Sorry? That's right. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Shol, Amar Torah hevi egla benachal. Why did the Kodesh Baruch Hu tell us to bring an egla benachal? Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Yavai davar shaloi asa peiros. Bring an animal that never gave birth to anything. It's a young animal. And let's chop off its head in a place that's a dry riverbed that can never make peiros. And it'll be mechaper on the person who would have been able to have children, but since he was killed, he was prevented from having children. My peiros. What does it mean, peiros? If it means having children, so are you telling me that the whole point of Egla Rufa is because someone could have had children and we prevented him from having children? Are you telling me that the whole parsha of Egla Rufa will not apply if the murder victim was too old to have children, or if he was someone who couldn't have children? The whole halacha of Egla Rufa wouldn't apply. No one argues that. So the can't be talking about peri-virevin. Mitzvahs. Every person could do more mitzvahs. This person had a whole life ahead of him where he could have done so many more mitzvahs. Yet he was prevented, he was killed, and all his mitzvahs came to a grinding halt. That's why we do the kapara in a place that cannot produce pears on an animal that cannot produce pears. Rough, tough. How do you know Eson means that it's rough and tough? It says in the pasuk, Eson Moshevecha v'sim basela kanecha. Your place is an Eson, and we're going to put your nest where it's rock. So you see that Eson is associated with hard. V'omer shimu harim es riv Hashem. Listen, mountains, to the battle of Hashem. V'esonim moistei aretz. So you see, Esonim is associated with harim. Mountains are made out of rocks. Acherim omer minayin leison shu yashan. How do you know Eson means that it's also old and ancient? Goy Eson, who goy me'olam, meaning it's also old and ancient. Zok the Gemara weiter. So it doesn't mean, Rashi, it doesn't mean that you brought rocks to this place. It means this has to be naturally a place that's dry and rocky and hard. Zok the Gemara weiter. You hit it in the back, in the back of the neck with the kupitz. My timer, Gomer arifa mechata sa'oif. It says by Achat Asayv that the Malika is done through the back of the head, and we learn the word Arifa, which says there and here as well. We have to actually look at the exact pronunciation because that's going to be very relevant right now in the Lashon HaPasuk. So let's see if I can find the Pasuk. It says over here, Asher loy ye oved boy. Ye oved boy sounds like in the future. V'lo yizareya also sounds like it's in the future. So Zok the Heilige Gemara. It's not referring to the future. It's referring to the past. Meaning, in the past, there was a place where no one ever planted there, no one ever worked the land over here. So Rav Amar, everybody agrees that the pasuk is telling you that you're not allowed to plant or do any work on this land in the future. That's pashut. You should not plant it in the future. The whole machlokes is if you also need to find a piece of land where nothing was done to it in the past as well. Rabbi Yosy, who says it also means l'shavar, says that if the Torah wanted to mean only laba, the Torah could have used a word that's more clearly referencing the future. Miksiv v'lo ye'ubat, v'lo ye'ayved. I don't know my diktuk properly, but it could have used wording that is more clear, that it connotates the future. So therefore, since it didn't, it also means to tell us that no work was done on it in the past. Rabbi Yonasan, miksiv asher lo nevad. Lo nevad surely means the past. It doesn't say lo nevad, so surely it's only talking about the future. We're not worried about the past at all. Rabbi Yosy, asher, is the word asher is l'shavar mashma. So it's not from the dika. The word is asher. It sounds like it never happened in the past. Rabbi Yonasan, asher ribuyahu. It's just a ribuy, like we said earlier. Asher is a ribuy to be marba, other things that we'll probably see later in the Gemara. Rashi Bala rabbis kalavoidis. Oh, the rabbis kalavoidis could come on like we just learned on Amud Aleph. It's also true. I mean, it's an issue to plant here. Every avodah, how do you make sure it's not going to happen? The folk, I guess they have to know. I guess that's been marked off. Umuta lisvek sham ship pishtan olnakasham avanim taner abanim. Ashelo yubad bavlo yizrei. Ainly elizriya. I would only know planting is forbidden. Shar avoidis minayin. How do I know that other types of work are prohibited as well? Tabelomer ashelo yubad bo mikol makay. Imke mata belomer lo yizrei. Why does it below yizrei? She should have said lo yubad bo. No work can be done. Lo malach. It's only certain type of work that's prohibited. Mazriyam yuchedesh she begufa shal karka. Avkol shehi begufa shal karka. The only type of work that's prohibited is work that's working the land itself. Yata srikas pishtan v'nikra avanim. Just using it as an industrial space to build a factory in, that wouldn't be prohibited. She'enan begufa shal karka, that would be allowed. Nikr means, I believe, to chisel. I thought nikr means to clean up, but it means to chisel. What does the article say? Does it say the word nikr? Does the article touch the word nikr? Does it mean to plane or to chisel? Or I think it means to chisel. We'll see the article.
Chisel.
Chiseling. So it's chiseling. Ve'ema shelo yubad ba'klal v'lo yizrei prat. Kala prat emechal mashav prat. So there's the asher that we said a moment ago. The word asher, like Rabbi Yonasan said, doesn't mean it's referring to the past. It's telling you it's a ribuy, that any type of malacha on the karka is also. Dr. Marbater, zikne ir rechten yudem they wash their hands. Zikne ir ahi hakroivim el chalol. All of the elders of the city that's closest to the chalol, yirchetzu es yudem al egla rufa, they wash their hands binachal. She'ein tamad loy mahar rufa. Why did it say ha'arufa? Umata loy mahar rufa. It means al makam arifasa shal egla. It's right on the place where they chopped off the head of the egla rufa. That's where they wash their hands. When they say yadeinu loy shavchu es adam hazeh ve'einenu loy rou. Correct the Gemara v'chi ali beinu also to bezdin shavchim damin. Would anyone think that the bezdin are murderers? Ella, what it means is loy bali yadeinu fatrenu b'lei mezaynais v'loy inuhu v'nachnu b'lei levaya. We didn't ignore him. If we saw him, we would have been mekarvim. Tanya, hey Rab Meir Omer. Probably with the temple. I don't know. I'm not sure how it's done. Probably with the temple. Tanya, Ham Rab Meir Omer. Kaivin lilevaya. You force someone to be malava somebody. You actually force someone to do it. It's not optional. I got to rush because I got to finish. Sheshchar al-vaya ein lo shir. Shenemar, it says, the yiru ha-shoymrim ish yoytzim in the ear. The shoymrim saw someone leaving the city, but yoymuloi, and they asked him, hareinu na es mevaya ear. Please show us the entrance to the city. Vasinu imcha chesed, and we'll pay you back if you show us the entrance. So you have a traveler who doesn't know where he's going, and he reaches out to a local and he asks him for help. Uksiv, and the local was kind enough to help this traveler. Vayarim is mevaya ear. Uma chesed also imoy. They told him we're going to do a chesed with you. You know what they did? Shekal oisa ear hargul ufichar. They killed out the entire city. But this man and his entire family, they spared. This is in Shoftim, so I'm not sure who it's referring to, but they were spared. It says, ish eretz achitim. How do you know he was spared? Because this person ended up traveling to Eretz Achitim. Vayivan he built a city there, and you know what the name of the city was? Vayikushma Luz. Luz is a very famous city. Tishma Atayim Mezeh. And Rashi says Atayim Mezeh means until today, forever and ever, that city was Makim. So he did one favor. He showed them the way, and because of that, his family survives until today in safety because of that schus. Tanya, Hoya, he lose. This is the same lose. This is the lose where they would make the tchelas, which means they had a highly profitable industry in that city. He lose Shabbos Sancheir Veloy Bilbala. Sancheir mixed everybody up. But the city of Luz was spared. Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed everything. Veloy Achriva. The Af Malach HaMavis Ein Loy Rishus Laverba. We know that the Malach HaMavis can't get into Luz. People in Luz are not losers. They're winners because they never die and they're successful. So they might be called lose, but they're winners. Elozakanim Shabbat, Bisman Shadait and Kotalayan. Imagine, ich kann schon nicht leben, ich bin schon verekelt von der Welt. Oh, I gotta get out of here. So then, if they want to die, they have to go out of the chayma and then they mason. So imagine one guy who just gave directions. He had a schus that la'oil me'ad u'lenetach netzachim. His family and his descendants have unlimited parnasa, and they're safe from any danger, and they even live as long as they want. Look at this proste guy. He didn't even give them directions. We're going to soon see. He pointed to them. He didn't even have the courage to say, "Sir, let me show you the way." He didn't even do that. He didn't say, "Follow me, I'll show you." Nevertheless, if you actually physically walk with a person and you begleit him, you escort him, al achas kama v'kama, imagine what the schar would be. Correct, Gemara. So how did he show them the way if he didn't actually go baraglo? He went like this to show in that direction. He pointed. I don't know which finger he used. I think Levaya is underrated. It seems like it's extremely powerful. What happens if you're traveling and no one is accompanying you? How do you protect yourself? Yasik b'Torah. Torah is a great escort. Torah is like an escort of chen, it's like a big chain of jewelry around your neck. Since Pari escorted Avram all of 4 steps, he was able to be mishabed Klal Yisrael for 400 years. Even if you don't walk him out of the city, you just walk him in the city towards the gate of the city, he will not be damaged. He got into a danger of Eitzel, but he was saved. I think the traveler. Chaver is Atchum Shabbos. Talmud l'Rav ein lo shir. The Kama, I love that. There's no shir for Talmud l'Rav. So how much is that? Because even that there is a shir. I'm Sheshes at Parsa. Rabbi Muvik, it's shloisha parsois. You have to be malava your Rabbi Muvik. Rav Kahana alvei l'Rabsimi bar Ashi mipum nahara ad Beit Sinisa de Bavel. Beit Sinisa de Bavel is a place by Bavel where they had palm trees growing. I'm not sure how far that is. But Kimatu Hasam, when they arrived to these palm trees, Amrlei, Vadai Damrisu, did you not once tell us that Hani Tzinisi de Bavel, Mishnei Adam Arishaninu? Didn't you once tell us that this cluster of palm trees are here from the Sheshes Shemei Bereshis? Amrlei says, now that you're mentioning it, Adrachtan Milsa, I'm remembering something that you once told me. The Amar Rabbi Yosy bar Chanina, Ma'dichsiv, Ba'aretz le'avar ba'ish, a land that no one passed through, V'lo Adam Sham, and no one stood there. Correct the Gemara, no one sat there. Correct the Gemara, this is double talk, it's double speak. If no one ever passed by there, Heichen Yoshav. So why does it have to say Yoshav? Ella, you know what it means? It doesn't mean literally nobody was there. It means Eretz Shegazar Aleha Adam Arishain Liyishai Nisyashva. Eretz Shaloi Gazar Aleha Adam Arishain Nisyashva. Adam Arishain determined exactly what's going to happen with all the land. He didn't just name everybody, name all the animals. He actually said this is going to be eventually a city. This is going to remain wilderness. So any land that Adam Arishain didn't designate as a land that's going to be built up was not Nisyashva. So that's the problem. But you know why? Because Adam didn't declare that there should be a yishuv there. So therefore, it doesn't mean that these palm, when you said earlier that these palm trees were there from Sheshes Mebreshis, it doesn't literally mean that they were there from Sheshes Mebreshis. It means Adam Arishan said that this cluster of palm trees will eventually grow here. Rav Mordechai Alvei Rabashi Megronya Vad Bekipi V'Amala Ad Beidura. Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Meir Kol She'enim Malava Umislava. Someone who's not Malava others or Mislava, he doesn't get baglighted by people. Well, the problem is I don't understand. What did I do wrong if someone wasn't Malava me? What am I supposed to do? So there are those who learn it means someone who wanted to be Malava me said, no, don't come with me, stay back. That's one shot. But the Mashar brings out Gavaltik shot. What if someone has no one to baglight him? So he should learn Torah. Because the Gemara says earlier that's like Lavoya. If someone is not baglighted and he doesn't learn Torah, so he's not Mislava, he ilu shayvach damim. If the people of Yericho would have escorted Elisha, when Elisha was leaving Yericho, the kids there were making fun of Elisha, and because of that, he sicked bears upon them. But had the people of the city escorted him out, the children would have never shepherded with him, and he would have never had to sick the bears on them. He was traveling out of Yericho. And young children, and we'll soon see what does it mean, young children. They were making fun of him. Baldi's going. But we'll see. We darshan doesn't mean Baldi. Amaloi, Ale, get out of here. You made our panusa krach. Krach means you made this place bald. No, you destroyed our panusa. Elisha destroyed their panasa. Rashi, now he destroyed their panasa because there was no good water in the city. So people at Parnasa, they would go to neighboring cities, they would draw water, and they would sell. They made tons of money on bottled water. Even today, it's a big business. What did he do? He made it that the wells in Yericho should produce good water. He made a mace. So sure, it helped the whole city, but it ruined those merchants because now their product wasn't so in demand anymore. What do you mean little children? Amar Belazar, Sheminu Armina mitzvahs. The Na'ar means they're clean from mitzvahs. Ketanim Shemikatne Amona, they didn't have a moon in their banish. Okay, it's getting very late, so we'll stop here. We'll be mamshech tomorrow. That's right. You know, let's finish the two dots for us, but tomorrow anyway I'm gonna have to go back because it's just such a beautiful Gemara. Tana Na'ar Mayu Ubiz Bizu Atman Ketanim. They made themselves billig. Why? Because if they would have been mature, they would have had a moon on their banish and they would have not shepherded with Elisha. By shepherding with Elisha, they made themselves billig. The Dilma Hashem Koiman. Who said Na'arim? You have to darshan that the Na'urim and the mitzvahs. Maybe it means they came from the city of Nu'uran. Milak Shiv, don't you find a place called Nu'uran? V'ada Ba'aram Yotu Gedudin V'yeshbu Me'eretz Yisrael Naira Katana. A Naira Katana. The Gemara asked, the Kachla Naira Katana. You can't be a Naira and a Katana. There are two different things. V'amar Padas Katana the Min Nu'uran. She was a Katana from the city of Nu'uran. So maybe here as well that they were from Nu'uran, and that's what it means Na'irim. How could you darshan that they were Nu'urim and mitzvahs? So tomorrow, because Hasam like Mefarish Mekaima, there it doesn't say where she came from. So Naira means she came from that city. Hakam Mefarish Mekaima. Here it says they came out of Yericho. They weren't from Nu'uran, they were from Yericho. Vayev Acharav Vayarim, he saw them. Vayekalaleim b'Shem Hashem, and Elisha cursed them. Ma Ra, what did he see? Amarav Ra Mamish. He saw Mamish. What does that mean? Dr. Rashi. Oh, I don't have Rashi over here. So I'm stuck. Oh, Mamish. He just looked at them. I'm sorry. He just stared at them. Staring at them is enough to destroy them. Whenever Chacham stare and glare at somebody, it causes terrible consequences, either death or poverty. Shmuel Amar, Ra, he saw Shekulam nisabra b'han iman b'yom kippurim. All of these people who were shepherding him, he realized that they were conceived on Yom Kippur, which is a day where conception is also. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Amar Beluris Ra'alahem Kamarim. He saw they had a chup. He gave him a dirty look, but they got the chup. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rosh Lahoyta Ben Lachlucha Shal Mitzvah. They didn't even have a moisture of a mitzvah. They're totally dried out from mitzvahs. Correct Gemara, the Dilma Bizra'ayu Nehava Hava. How could he be so sure that they won't have any descendants? Sure, they didn't do mitzvahs, but sometimes they have the. How could you wipe out somebody? Maybe something good will come out of him. Amar Belazar Loy bum, loy bizarre, matzav kol adoros. He saw that never will anything good come out of these people, and that's why he sick the bears and that's why he destroyed them, like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu. But even koy v'choy, Pashup he's looking for a mitzri. But the Gemara Darshans, he looked to make sure that nothing good would ever come out of these people, and only then did he kill the mitzri. Kavaltik, so we'll stop here. We'll be back tomorrow.